Welcome to the solutions video for the first round in the 2019 SpaceChem tournament. For this puzzle, Normalization, the goal is to produce rings of 8 atoms connected by double bonds, using input rings of 12 atoms triple bonded and 4 atoms single bonded respectively. The scoring criteria was to use the fewest symbols. In the solutions, I found there were 3 main things which affected how well each of them did. First was the topology of the output molecule, where some people try to output the molecule as it appears in the output tray, others went for a more squashed shape to the molecule. As Lilikoff so kindly put it, no way is anyone making actual squares of these elements, except maybe Pseudodude as a novelty submission or something. Second was how sinks and flip-flops were used. For the majority of the solutions, counting how many times each atom was processed was vital to sending the right molecules out with the correct number of bonds. Whether each solution focused more on flip-flops or sinks to do this, and how they were used was very important. And thirdly, the method of how each solution disassembled and reassembled each molecule. I found there were 3 distinct ways the solutions processed the molecules. For this video, rather than going through the solutions in the scoring order, I'll go through each of these methods and compare the solutions for each of them. First up, we have those who chose to completely disassemble the molecules using the swap command, then rebuild the output molecules entirely using bonds. One difficulty in using the swap method is making sure the Waldos know when a corner is reached on the large theta ring in order to rotate it to the next side. Twistja solved this with a clever placement of grab instructions, but in doing so has to avoid grabbing the wrong part of the ring. Unfortunately, the workaround for this results in a few additional symbols on the left. Counterpoint also uses sinks to count, but doubles back on most of them to save on symbols. The design also attempts to complete output rings while there are no atoms available to be added to them, resulting in a reduced symbol count in exchange for a lot of downtime. Rezune's solution counts using a combination of flip-flops on the red Waldo and sinks on the blue Waldo, giving us a very clear design and a system which is very easy to understand just by watching. Binky's design uses the red Waldo exclusively for disassembling the input molecules, while the blue Waldo assembles the output molecules and uses a lot of flip-flops to count both for the respective input molecules and for the theta output molecule. The delay between the blue Waldo leaving the sync instruction and passing over the swap instruction dictates whether the red Waldo should rotate or not before swapping. Zig's design, by contrast, uses the blue Waldo exclusively for assembling the output molecules, while the red Waldo disassembles and counts using a tidy array of flip-flops. Spoparan's solution also uses the blue Waldo to reconstruct the output molecules, while the red Waldo uses sinks to pause for each atom being processed, and uses the flip-flops to repeat this section for either input ring, and to switch between the two of them. Tough Thought's solution uses the same method, with one Waldo handling the outputs and the other handling each side of the input rings in turn, using a series of sinks to handle each atom of the side, and using flip-flops to repeat these actions for each side, and again to switch between the two of them. Pentapic's solution has the blue Waldo repeating the same actions, usually processing two atoms within a single loop, while the red Waldo uses sinks and flip-flops to count for the input and output instructions. Gigagol again uses the blue Waldo to do most of the heavy lifting, using a pair of flip-flops to count atoms for half of the output rings, while the red Waldo counts using sinks to input, output, and to move the rings between each of the output areas. Cactus, Blueeyedrat, and this round's winner, Andy, all had very similar ideas on how to solve it, and all wound up with very good scores in this round. By having one Waldo landing on the bond plus instruction each cycle, less effort is needed to time any bonding that needs to be done. Cactus bonded the two small input rings together so they could be sent over at the same time. Blueeyedrat, on the other hand, decided to send out the two small rings separately, and particularly fond of the symmetry in this design, which Blueeyedrat aptly describes as a toaster. Andy's design saves on the additional bond plus symbols needed to form the double bonds by using a corner flip-flop to hold the atoms over the bonders for an extra cycle. The flip-flop replacing the bond plus on the right does not actually reduce the symbol count, and in fact increase the cycle count by 800 cycles, but I find the solution more satisfying for using just the one bond plus. The second method of assembly and disassembly I've seen in the solutions uses swaps to disassemble the large theta ring, but uses bonds to construct the small sigma ring directly into a flat output ring. Xaboka builds the sigma ring using just the blue Waldo, and uses a sync loop for the red Waldo to hold the theta ring for swapping. Of the solutions which use this method, Xaboka is the only one who switches between the two rings after either one of them is fully completed. All of the other solutions of this method send sigma rings out while still holding onto an incomplete theta ring. Lazycomet also uses the red Waldo to hold the large ring for the blue Waldo, but instead works on each side individually using flip-flops to count the sides. Blueeyedrat uses the blue Waldo exclusively for the small ring and the red Waldo for the large one. Ser doesn't actually use the red Waldo at all, instead using the blue Waldo for everything. Also, the sigma rings are split into atom pairs to form a full ring, rather than bonding the two rings directly together. The Waldo alternates between both of the rings, resulting in both outputs being produced at the same rate. RP0 also produces outputs at the same rate, and has the only solution which produces both shapes of the output rings. The third method only uses the swap instruction to split the large theta ring into two, making them just the right size to turn into flat rings. AJH's solution uses each Waldo to perform a specific step in construction of the output rings, using sinks to alternate between the two. RealOfficialTurf has each Waldo dedicated to each output ring, taking it in turns to process each one. Lilkoff also has each Waldo dedicated to their own rings, but lays things out so that the leftover 4-atom stick is already in position to be bonded directly to that of the following ring. Darius 1's solution has the blue Waldo working on the top portion of the theta ring, while the red Waldo deals with both of the leftover 4 sticks. The sigma ring is then treated as though it is a top theta ring, saving on symbols by reusing those instructions. Arraign uses both Waldos to work on the large ring, and brings in the second large ring before it finishes building the first output ring. Syncs are used to make the Waldos wait for each other, and results in some nice synchronized movement. Flexo has the blue Waldo doing most of the work, while the red Waldo is used to provide some extra instructions and a small amount of help moving atoms. Gigs has a similar solution to Flexo, with even the layout of bonders being the same, but Gigs skips a step by leaving the leftover 4-stick where it lands and bonding it to the second large ring as soon as it is sent in, meaning a simple swap instruction immediately produces a completed output ring. And finally, to end this video, I'd like to borrow the words of Tough Thought. My favourite part of any SpaceChem tournament is seeing all the amazing ways the players found to make their solutions work, always individually different, and often pursuing strategies that I either didn't regard as promising or didn't think of at all. Congratulations to Andy for the terrific optimisation, and well done to everyone who submitted a solution.